Hello humans, I am the Black Cat, and today we start a new franchise with The Omen. First of all, yes, my fan is on because it's hotter than Satan's balls here and I can't not have the fan on. Anyway, The Omen was released in 1976, starring Gregory Peck, Lee Remick, and Harvey Stevens. Okay, so I'm sure most people already know the story of The Omen, but if you don't, here's the story anyway. So Gregory Peck plays Robert Thorne, who is working in politics. His wife is due to give birth to their first child on the 6th of June at 6 a.m. Wink wink. Unfortunately, the baby is stillborn. Before he was able to see his wife, a priest pulls him aside and is like, "Hey, so we have this other baby whose mother died during birth. How about you take this baby and tell your wife it's hers? She'll never know. It's a win-win, right? She gets a baby, the baby gets a mother, and everyone's happy." So he agrees, and they take the baby as their own. Soon after, Robert is given the job of US Ambassador to Great Britain. It's a big promotion, so they move. Cut to 5 years later, big job, big house, and their son Damien is now 5 years old. They're doing so well, they can hold a big party for Damien's birthday, press included. During the party, the nanny sees a dog watching them. It's a Rottweiler, to be specific. Apparently, it's this movie that started the association of Rottweilers with hellhounds. I don't know if that's true, but I do know there were a few movies in the 70s, I think, that featured Rottweilers as like evil dogs. I personally don't think that's fair. No dog is evil. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So the nanny sees the dog, and the next thing we know, she's on the roof with a rope around her neck. She calls out to Damien, saying, "It's all for you, Damien," and she jumps. So there wasn't much said about the nanny. There were some reporters asking Robert about it, but it didn't really go any further than that as far as the family was concerned. But soon after, a new nanny arrives. She immediately wants to see Damien alone in his room. Robert and his wife let her in, then realize that neither of them actually hired her. They ask her about it, and she says the agency heard the news about the old nanny and decided to send her over. And they just accept that explanation. They don't follow up with the agency at all, at least not that they showed in the movie. It's just like, "Oh, okay, complete stranger we've never met before. Here's our child's bedroom. Oh, you want privacy with our child? Well, I don't know you, but okay, we'll leave you alone with him." Like, what? That would never happen these days. I remember I took a job of pet sitting and I needed a police clearance just to walk people's dogs. And this guy is in politics, so the chances of someone wanting to get to him would be rather high, right? But anyway, there's a priest that keeps trying to talk to Robert. He tells him that his son is evil and that he needs to go to Rome and find this other priest. Robert of course tells him to bog off, but the priest tells him that his wife is pregnant and Damien will try to kill the baby and his wife in order to be his only heir. Robert tells the priest that he's full of shit, but then not long after he finds out that his wife is pregnant. So he's like, After Robert talked to the priest gets killed in a freak accident. This grabs the attention of a reporter that's been hanging around taking photos. First he took photos of the nanny and then the priest, and he noticed that things would show up in the photos that kind of hinted at how they would die. Curious about the whole thing, he starts doing some research. After the priest dies, he goes to Robert and tells him what he knows. The priest was trying to convince Robert that Damien is the son of Satan and is the Antichrist. Robert, who's starting to be convinced, decides he's going to look into it more. The reporter tells him that he wants to join him because he took a photo of himself and found there's also a mark in his own photo. They travel to Rome to try and find the hospital where Damien was born, but they find out the hospital had burnt down not long after they were there, and all the records were destroyed in a fire. So they try to find the priest that convinced Robert to take Damien in the first place. They find him and he tells them to go to this old cemetery. Once there, they discover a few things. I don't really want to spoil that part because even though it is an older movie, there are some people who maybe haven't seen it and, there's details in there that I don't want to give away if you haven't seen it. Robert ends up meeting up with this archaeologist who gives him some daggers and tells him that he has to kill Damien in a church with the daggers. So, who the archaeologist is and how he has this information and is convinced that he could just tell this guy that he's never met before, yeah, here's some daggers, you need to go kill your son now. I don't know. That part confused me. At this point though, Robert is like, you know what, no, he's just a kid. I can't kill a kid. Which is like, fair enough. You'd really have to question his character if he was like, yeah, sure, without any attack of conscience. I mean, son of Satan, 5-year-old child that I've raised as my own. It's a tough choice. Anyhow, there's another freak accident and the reporter is killed. And this kind of convinces Robert that he has to go through with it. He grabs Damien and takes him to a church. As he's got him on the ground, about to stab him with the dagger, Damien starts pleading for his life and calls Robert daddy, as a child would. Again, emphasizing that Robert raised this child. He saw him as his son, and Damien looked at Robert as his father. Imagine the conflict that would be going on in Robert's head. Are you imagining it? Well, no time because he's dead. The Omen overall is a good movie. It is enjoyable. I feel like it moves along at a good pace. There's no moments that feel dragged out at all. The acting, of course, is solid. It's not overly gory or violent. It more relies on the implication of the situation to build the tension. I did like the dog as well, but it was a bit random that it kept just showing up. I do, however, think the dog walking down the hall was the best shot in the movie. I think that the reporter's photos was an interesting element. Like, it showed that these people were destined to die in a certain way, but it's not explained how the reporter was able to take these photos. Like, why these images showed up in his photos. There was no real explanation of that. There wasn't even like a, that's weird kind of thing. He's just like, look, I took these photos and look what showed up and this is how the person died and blah de blah. I don't know, it was an interesting element. Was it really necessary? The only thing the photographs really did was give the reporter a reason to want to go through with the whole thing, because he realized that he himself was destined to be killed. But if he didn't go along with the whole thing, would he have been killed anyway? Because if he wasn't involved, he wouldn't have gone to Rome with Robert and he wouldn't have been killed, right? Am I crazy? So yeah, the inclusion of the photos was a bit, I don't know, it almost was unnecessary, I think, now that I'm thinking about it. It didn't add to the overall story. Maybe they could have, like, you know, not included all the photos and stuff. One downside to the movie that I would have liked to see change was the relationship between Robert and Damien. It wasn't really there. There was lots of emphasis on the relationship between Robert and his wife, but they didn't really show Robert with his son. I think they could have added some bonding moments between the two, really showing Robert as a caring father figure. I think that would have made the ending a lot more impactful. If we were shown Robert and Damien interacting more, then his inner conflict towards the end would have been more emphasized. So when Damien calls him daddy at the end, it would have hit harder, I think. So, would I watch it again? Well, yes. I've seen this movie several times before and no doubt I will watch it again. But anyway, that's all the time I have for this review. Let me know what you think of The Omen if you've seen it, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!